What if I told you that the Great Britain we know today could have disappeared from the map as early as the 9th century? At that time, the very concept of England was just a vague dream, divided into warring kingdoms and engulfed in endless wars. The great pagan army of Vikings did not just raid, it methodically conquered the island, erasing old borders and laws. It seemed that the fall of the last Anglo-Saxon stronghold was only a matter of time, and the history of this people was about to end. But one man, driven into the swamps and deprived of his army, refused to admit defeat in the face of overwhelming force. This is a story of how despair turned into strategy, and belief in the impossible changed the fate of an entire continent. Watch the video to the end to find out what unexpected tactics allowed the invincible army to be defeated, and why the outcome of one battle determined the future of Western civilization. Are you ready to learn the truth about the force that made the entire Christian world of that time tremble? The Vikings who came to England in the second half of the 9th century were not just a bunch of robbers looking for gold and silver. They were a great pagan army, a complex military machine with a clear organization and long-term goals of colonizing new lands. They did not act chaotically, but as a well-coordinated mechanism controlled by experienced leaders and konungs. Their goal was not simply to plunder the coast and leave, but to seize the land, establish their own laws, and stay there forever. This army was a coalition of various Scandinavian troops united for the sake of a common large-scale expansion. They understood perfectly well the political fragmentation of the English kingdoms and skillfully used their internal strife to their advantage. The Vikings skillfully maneuvered, forming temporary alliances with some rulers in order to destroy others. Their tactics were flexible, combining swift cavalry raids with powerful infantry attacks. They knew no mercy in battle, but at the same time were pragmatic politicians. By the 870s, the kingdoms of Northumbria and East Anglia had already fallen to the Scandinavians, becoming their puppet states. Mercia, once a powerful kingdom, was exhausted and forced to pay a huge tribute to buy a shaky peace. Only Wessex remained, the last independent kingdom in the south of the island, standing in the way of complete conquest. It was Wessex that was the target of the next decisive blow by the great army led by King Guthrum. Guthrum was a cunning strategist who understood that the destruction of Wessex would make him the ruler of all England. The attack on Wessex began with a surprise and treacherous strike in the midst of the winter holidays. The Vikings broke all the unspoken rules of warfare by attacking the royal residence in Chippenham on the 12th night after Christmas. This took the Saxons by surprise, as military operations usually slowed down in winter due to the difficulty of supply and movement. King Alfred barely managed to escape, and the kingdom's defenses collapsed overnight. The Wessex army was scattered, and many nobles chose to flee across the sea or submit to the invaders. Meanwhile, news of the fall of Chippenham spread across the island, causing fear and despondency. People believed that God had turned away from them and that the era of Christian kings had come to an end. The chronicles of the time describe this period as a time of great despair and darkness. No one believed that the broken kingdom could rise from the ashes. But history loves unexpected twists when all odds seem to be zero. It was a clash not just between two armies, but between two different civilizations and worldviews. On one side was the expansive, young, and aggressive Viking culture, confident in its right to power. On the other was the traditional hierarchical society of Wessex, cornered and fighting for its existence. The outcome of this confrontation would determine not only the borders, but also the cultural code of the future state. The stakes were extremely high: survival or complete oblivion. We are very interested in hearing your point of view. Do you think the Vikings' victory was inevitable without the intervention of chance? Write about it in the comments. Ready to learn the secret that turned a doomed place into an impregnable bastion? After his disastrous escape from Chippenham, King Alfred found refuge in a place that was the least like a royal court. It was the island of Athelney, lost among the endless marshes of Somerset. The terrain was a maze of waterways, boggy marshes, and thick reeds, impassable to those who did not know the secret paths. For the Vikings, accustomed to open battle and the open sea, these marshes were unfamiliar and dangerous territory. Athelney became not just a hiding place, but an operational base for preparing resistance. Alfred used the natural features of the landscape as his main defensive advantage. The marshes made it impossible to use heavy cavalry or launch a mass infantry attack against the enemy. Any unit that ventured deep into the marshes risked getting lost or ambushed. This gave the king precious time to rest and regroup his forces. Living conditions on the island were harsh and demanded complete dedication from everyone there. The king and his entourage lived like ordinary soldiers, sharing meager food and sleeping under the open sky. This brought Alfred closer to his people, strengthening their personal loyalty and fighting spirit. There was no place for court etiquette here. Only survival skills and a willingness to fight to the end were important. It was in these hardships that the character of the future army was forged. Messengers were sent from this island to all corners of the counties of Somerset, Wiltshire, and Hampshire. They carried secret messages to the aldermen and 10 men who remained loyal to the king, calling on them to prepare for the uprising. It was a dangerous mission, as the lands were patrolled by Viking troops. But the resistance network was slowly but surely being rebuilt, uniting scattered forces into a single whole. Athelney became the heart-pumping blood into the veins of a paralyzed kingdom. The king personally planned operations, studying the terrain and developing tactics for small groups. He understood that he could not meet Guthrum in open battle at that time. His task was to wear down the enemy, to rob him of his confidence and peace of mind. The swamps allowed them to strike and disappear, remaining out of reach for a counterattack. It was a school of guerrilla warfare. The psychological significance of Athelney was enormous for the entire people of Wessex. Rumors that the king was alive and continuing the fight instilled hope in the hearts of the people. It was a symbol that the invaders' power was not unlimited and that resistance was possible. Nature itself seemed to have come to the defense of the legitimate ruler. During these months of isolation, Alfred thought a lot about the reasons for the defeat and how to change the structure of his army. He analyzed the Vikings' tactics, looking for their weaknesses and ways to counter them. The ideas that were born among the marshes later formed the basis of his military reforms. This period became an incubator for the creation of a new Anglo-Saxon military doctrine. Alfred proved that even the smallest piece of land can become a springboard for a great victory if there is a will to resist. Do you think Alfred would have been able to assemble an army if he hadn't had those few months of respite in the marshes? In the next chapter, you will learn how Alfred used tactics that were completely uncharacteristic of kings of that time. You've definitely never heard of this unique approach to warfare in the context of the Age of Chivalry. Instead of gathering banners and blowing horns, Alfred waged a veritable war of shadows against the Vikings. He understood that his forces were insufficient for a general battle, so he chose the tactic of asymmetric warfare. Small mobile Saxon units attacked Viking foragers, patrols, and supply trains, disappearing as quickly as they appeared. It was a war of attrition, aimed not at capturing territory but at destroying the enemy's logistics. The Saxons knew the terrain perfectly, every path in the forest and every ford across the river. This allowed them to appear where the Vikings felt completely safe. They attacked under cover of night or in thick fog, creating chaos and panic. The Vikings, accustomed to being hunters, suddenly found themselves becoming the hunted. The constant tension began to undermine the Scandinavians' fighting spirit. The most important element of this war was intelligence and disinformation. Alfred created a network of spies who infiltrated Viking camps, disguised as merchants or vagabonds. He knew about Guthrum's plans, the size of his troops, and his discipline problems. This knowledge allowed him to strike at the most vulnerable points. The Saxons also used psychological pressure by leaving signs of their presence. The Vikings never knew how many enemies were hiding in the nearest forest, a dozen or 100. Fear of the unknown forced the invaders to stay in large groups, which limited their control over the territory. The initiative gradually passed into the hands of the Anglo-Saxons. This small war allowed Alfred to accumulate the resources and weapons necessary for the decisive battle. The equipment captured from the Vikings was used to arm his growing army. Each successful raid brought not only trophies, but also new volunteers willing to join the resistance. The people saw that the struggle was continuing. The hit-and-run tactics wore down Guthrum, who was unable to force Alfred into a decisive battle on his own terms. The king lost men in minor skirmishes without gaining any strategic advantage in return. His army, locked in garrisons, began to lose its mobility and aggressiveness. Time was on the side of the King of Wessex. By the spring of 878, the situation had changed. Alfred had gone from being a fugitive to the leader of a powerful rebel movement. Like this if you appreciate the king's cunning strategy. Guess how long it took to unite the scattered forces of the kingdom into a single fist? In the 7th week after Easter, Alfred made a decision that would determine the fate of England. He sent messengers with orders for all those capable of bearing arms to gather at Egbert's stone. This location was not chosen at random. It was on the border of 3 counties and had important symbolic significance, recalling the times of Alfred's grandfather. The gathering was arranged in strict secrecy so as not to give Guthrum the opportunity to launch a preemptive strike. People flocked to the appointed place from the forests, villages, and distant hamlets. They were warriors of the Fyrd, a militia that remained loyal to their king and their land. They came with hope, inspired by rumors of Alfred's return. The meeting was emotional. Many believed the king to be dead and wept with joy at seeing him alive. The chronicles say that they welcomed him as one risen from the dead. The assembled army was a motley crew. There were professional warriors from the royal guard in chainmail and helmets, and simple peasants with spears and axes. But they were united by a single goal and a single fury against the invaders. Alfred managed to gather several thousand men under his banners, which was an impressive force for those times. This was proof that his authority remained unquestionable. The goal was to intercept Guthrum's army, which was based in Chippenham but could move out into the field. Alfred sought to impose battle on terrain favorable to himself. He led his men confidently, demonstrating complete mastery of the strategic initiative. Fear of the Vikings was replaced by a thirst for revenge. The army moved in tight columns, ready to deploy into battle formation at any moment. Scouts rode ahead, clearing the way and watching the horizon. The tension grew with every mile that brought them closer to the enemy. Everyone understood that there was no turning back. On the night before the battle, Alfred's army took up positions just a few miles from the main Viking forces. The fires of their campfires were visible in the darkness, but the Saxons remained silent. The coming day would decide who would own this land. There was a sense of anticipation in the air. The gathering at Egbert's stone was a turning point, when scattered resistance turned into a national army. How do you think these people felt as they went into battle against an enemy that had seemed invincible until recently? In the next chapter, you will learn how the ancient tactic of the Wall of Shields was able to stop the fierce onslaught of the berserkers. The main tactical formation of the Anglo-Saxons, like their opponents, was the famous Wall of Shields. This formation required iron discipline and absolute trust in the comrade standing next to you. The warriors lined up in a tight line, overlapping the edges of their round wooden shields to create a solid barrier. The front row consisted of the most experienced and well-armed fighters, followed by those who supported the formation with their spears and body weight. The Wall of Shields was not just a defensive measure, it was an active weapon. It could move forward, pushing back the enemy, or stand to the death, repelling attacks. Success depended on how long the formation could maintain its integrity under attack. If one fighter fell or retreated, a breach would form in the wall, into which the enemy would immediately rush. The physical strain in such a battle was enormous. The warriors pressed their shields against those of their opponents, trying to knock them over or force them back. It resembled a monstrous crush, where screams, the clang of metal, and the crack of wood merged into a single roar. Spearmen stood in the back rows, striking over the heads of their comrades, trying to reach the enemy behind his shield. Maintaining formation required tremendous endurance. The Vikings often tried to break through the Wall of Shields with fierce charges, using heavy axes capable of splitting shields. They also used the boar tactic, a wedge-shaped formation designed to break through the center of the enemy line. The Saxons had to counter this fury with coolness and steadfastness. The weapons of the front row were swords, axes, and short spears. The rear rows could use bows or throw stones while the opponents closed in. But when the walls converged, only melee weapons were used. Every movement was restricted. Every blow had to be precise. The Wall of Shields was only effective in open terrain where a wide front could be deployed. Edington provided just such conditions. Alfred chose a position on high ground, which gave his wall of shields an additional advantage. Attacking uphill is always more difficult. It was this ancient tactic, perfected by discipline and desperation, that became Alfred's trump card. It allowed him to hold back the onslaught of the best army in Europe at that time. Without a strong wall of shields, no strategy could have saved Wessex. What if I told you that the outcome of the battle was decided by a single moment? The Battle of Edington began at sunrise. Alfred's army took up an advantageous position on the crest of a hill, forming that very indestructible wall of shields. Guthrum's Vikings, coming out of their camp, were forced to attack from below, overcoming the uneven terrain. This immediately put them at a disadvantage, depriving them of their usual momentum. The clash between the two armies was fierce and long. The chronicles describe the battle as a meat grinder lasting many hours, with neither side willing to give way. The Vikings threw themselves at the Saxons' shields wave after wave, trying to break through with their fury and strength. But the wall of Wessex shields stood firm, like a rock against which the waves crash. Alfred personally commanded the center, inspiring his warriors by example. His presence on the front lines gave his men strength when it seemed that their arms could no longer hold their weapons. The Saxons understood that they had nowhere to retreat. Behind them were their homes, families, and freedom. This gave them desperate determination. Guthrum, seeing that frontal attacks were unsuccessful, tried to maneuver, but the dense formation of the Saxons gave him no chance. The advantage of the high ground allowed Alfred's men to conserve their strength, while the Vikings exhausted themselves storming the slope. Gradually, the initiative began to shift to the Anglo-Saxons. Guthrum managed to gather the remnants of his army and retreat to a fortified camp in Chippenham. He hoped to sit behind the walls, lick his wounds, and wait for reinforcements, but Alfred had no intention of repeating past mistakes and giving the enemy a chance to recover. The victory at Edington was complete and unconditional. It was not just a successful skirmish, but a strategic defeat of the invaders' main forces. Wessex proved that it was capable not only of defending itself, but also of winning an open battle. But winning on the battlefield was only half the battle. Ready to find out how Alfred made the proud Vikings beg for mercy without spilling another drop of blood? In the next chapter, you'll learn which siege was the final point in this war. After his triumph on the battlefield, Alfred immediately led his troops to Chippenham, where the remnants of Guthrum's army had taken refuge. The king understood that storming the fortifications would be too costly. The losses during the assault could decimate his own army. Instead, he chose a tactic of complete blockade. The Saxons surrounded the fortress with a tight ring, cutting off all supply and communication routes. Alfred ordered all food supplies in the vicinity to be destroyed or taken away so that the Vikings would have nothing to plunder during possible sorties. All the livestock that the Scandinavians had not managed to drive into the fortress was also captured. It was a classic siege of attrition, calculated on the assumption that hunger would do what swords could not. The Vikings were trapped. Inside the crowded fortress, the supplies prepared for a short defense quickly ran out. There was a catastrophic shortage of water and food. Guthrum hoped for help from other parts of England or from across the sea, but no help came. Alfred was in complete control of the situation. The terms of surrender were harsh but fair. The Vikings had to hand over hostages from among the most noble people, and Alfred himself chose who to take. This ensured that Guthrum would not break his word, as had happened before. The Scandinavians swore to leave the Kingdom of Wessex and never attack it again. But Alfred's most important and unexpected demand was that Guthrum be baptized. The king wanted more than just military peace. He wanted to integrate the Viking leader into the Christian system of values and political relations. It was a far-sighted political move that changed the very nature of the conflict. Guthrum, seeing that there was no other way out, agreed to all the terms. The gates of Chippenham opened, and the exhausted Vikings came out, laying down their weapons. The siege ended in a complete victory for Alfred, achieved through patience and strategy. Chippenham, the place where Alfred's downfall began, became the site of his greatest triumph. The circle was complete. The threat of destruction to Wessex had been eliminated, and a new chapter in the history of relations between the Saxons and the Danes had begun. A few weeks after the surrender, an event took place that cemented Alfred's victory on a spiritual and political level. In the village of Ellers, not far from Athelney, the baptism of Guthrum took place. The Viking leader, who had worshipped Odin and Thor all his life, converted to Christianity. King Alfred himself became his godfather, giving him a new Christian name, Athelstan. This event had enormous symbolic significance. By becoming his godfather, Alfred accepted Guthrum into his spiritual family, becoming his senior in status. From a mortal enemy, the Viking chieftain became an adopted son and ally. This bound him with obligations that were understandable and sacred to the Christian world, and as Alfred hoped, would be respected by the new convert. It was a compromise, but it was the only one possible under the circumstances. Alfred understood that he did not have the strength to completely expel all the Vikings from the island. Instead of endless war, he chose peaceful coexistence and containment. Guthrum, in turn, received a legitimate kingdom and rich lands for his people. The Wessex peace lasted surprisingly long by the standards of those turbulent times. Guthrum kept his word and did not attack Wessex for the rest of his life. He ruled East Anglia as a Christian king, even minting coins with his baptismal name. Alfred's plan to tame the enemy worked. This peace gave England a much-needed respite. Peasants could return to their fields, and trade began to revive. Fear of constant raids receded, giving way to hope for stability. Alfred made the most of this peaceful time. He did not relax, knowing that the threat from other Viking forces still existed. The treaty became the foundation on which he began to build the future of his kingdom. Guthrum's baptism was an act of the greatest statesmanship. Alfred turned a military victory into a diplomatic triumph, changing the political map of Britain forever. Realizing that peace with Guthrum did not guarantee safety from other Viking armies, Alfred embarked on a major military reform. He analyzed the vulnerabilities of his kingdom and concluded that the old defense system was ineffective. Wessex needed a network of permanent fortifications capable of protecting the population and delaying the enemy until the main forces arrived. Thus, the burgh system was born. Burghs were fortified settlements or forts located at strategic points throughout the kingdom. They were built on the sites of old Roman ruins, on islands or capes, and also created from scratch. The main principle was location. No village in Wessex was to be more than 20 miles from the nearest burgh. This allowed residents to quickly take refuge behind the walls in case of danger. The king also began building his own fleet. He understood that the Vikings had to be fought not only on land, but also at sea, intercepting their ships before they could land. Alfred personally participated in the design of new ships, which were larger and taller than standard drakkars, giving them an advantage in boarding combat. The burgh system became a real shield for Wessex. When a new wave of Vikings tried to capture the kingdom in the 890s, they faced an insurmountable obstacle. The invaders could not plunder freely as they encountered garrisons, and they were unable to storm the network of fortresses. This reform required enormous effort and resources, and at first met with resistance from the nobility. But Alfred was adamant, and time proved him right. He turned Wessex into a state that was ready for total defense. It was the system of burghs that became the material embodiment of Alfred's state power. It not only saved the country from conquest, but also laid the foundation for the future urban culture of England. The fortifications built for war became the foundation for peaceful life and prosperity. The Battle of Edington was not just a military victory, but the moment of birth of a new national idea. Alfred, the only surviving Anglo-Saxon king, became the natural center of attraction for all Englishmen, regardless of which kingdom they came from, Mercia, Wessex, or Kent. In him, they saw a defender and leader capable of uniting the people in the face of an external threat. Alfred began to style himself King of the Anglo-Saxons, rather than simply King of Wessex. This was a political declaration. He claimed authority over all Christians on the island who had not submitted to the Danes. He actively promoted the idea that all Anglo-Saxons were one people with a common faith, language, and culture. In addition to military reforms, Alfred launched a large-scale program to revive education and culture. He understood that a people who had forgotten their history and could not read were doomed. The king invited scholars from all over Europe, translated books from Latin into Old English, and personally participated in the education of the nobility. He believed that wisdom was as important for the survival of the state as swords. At his court, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle began to be written, a chronicle that recorded the history of the people and shaped their self-awareness. This document became the most important source of our knowledge about that era. Alfred created not just a kingdom, but a nation. The victory at Edington halted the process of Scandinavianization in England. If Alfred had lost, the English language and culture could have disappeared, dissolving into the Scandinavian world. England would have become just another overseas colony of the Vikings. But thanks to the steadfastness of one man, Anglo-Saxon identity was preserved and strengthened. Alfred's legacy was continued by his children and grandchildren. His son Edward the Elder and daughter Ethelfled recaptured significant territories in Mercia and East Anglia from the Vikings. And his grandson Athelstan became the first historical king of all England, completing the work begun by his grandfather. Alfred is the only English monarch in history to be given the epithet the Great. He earned it not only for his military victories, but also for saving civilization on his island. He was a warrior, a lawmaker, a scholar, and a saint in the eyes of his people. The Battle of Edington showed that even in the darkest hour, when there is almost no hope, courage and reason can change the course of history. It was a moment when chaos gave way to order and barbarism gave way to statehood. Today's England has its roots in the marshes of Athelney and the hill of Edington. This is the story of how scattered tribes forged a single nation. Without the year 878, the world we know would be completely different. We have seen how one battle, one man, and one strategy were able to turn the wheel of history. The Battle of Edington is a reminder that the future is never predetermined. Write in the comments what other historical events, in your opinion, have had such a profound impact on the fate of entire countries. Suggest topics for future videos that you would like to see on our channel, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on new journeys into the past.